Welcome back. Can we start, please? So welcome back, everybody. Second week of the course, fifth lecture, and now we move from the sort of standard search algorithms to more knowledge-informed search and knowledge representation issues. Before I get into these logical agents, as I call, or as they are called also in the book, just want to quickly ask whether everything is going right from the perspective of organization. So we had the first working groups on Friday with Dora and Daria. I hope you made use of this service. That was the one side, and then we had the practical sessions where Shane, Fabrizio, and Jeffrey helped you. So, and on Thursday, of course, the support session of Bertan. So, is there anything we should adapt, can improve on making it easier for you, better for you to follow the course? Yep.
Is there someone we can talk to discuss our research questions?
You can discuss the research questions with in the practical sessions, but you can also discuss them with me. Send me an email or talk to me after the lecture. Yeah. You had a question or just sort of grabbing your heart? Yeah.
Oh, sure. But no, actually I do.
Okay.
Is it possible to put up the slides a bit sooner?
I will try. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes it's handy because. Thank you.
3 hours later. So the question was whether I could put up the slides earlier. And so the videos, they need to be sort of transformed from the format of recording to the format that I can put up on YouTube. Yeah. And that takes a couple of hours to do so in the evening or in the, so if I have the time, I try to do it directly. Also this week particular more because the content of the videos might change a little bit. Last week, if you look at the videos from 2018, you get in principle the entire material in a slightly different order, but in principle it's the same. I try to bring stuff up earlier, and in any case, the slides. Anything else? Did you find the practical useful? Did you get the help that you needed? Is there anybody who hasn't started with the working sheet number 1 here in the room? It's a question you never get an answer to, but it's a sort of a reminder of please do it, because if you haven't started in such a short period of time, it might really be difficult. So let me ask you the other way around. Who is well underway or finished with the working sheet number 1 for the practical, getting up your Schnapsen system, running some experience? So who knows? Raise your hand if you think you're really confident that you're up a good way. The milestones, yeah. Building your first bots. Okay, I see still some people sort of. Are you on a good way of implementing the stuff, or are you still struggling? Yeah? Because the problem with these short periods is that there's very, very little time to catch up. If you've lost a week, if you don't know what to do after week 1, then it will be very difficult to know what to do after week 2. Yeah? So, I take this as everything is going smoothly, and I want to move now to the notion of logical agents, and also trying to answer the question, what's the logic? And give you some examples of logics, namely your favorite propositional logic that you've seen now several times, I believe some of you, and first order logic. Not so much from the theoretical perspective or from a reasoning perspective. We look at it from an algorithmic perspective on Wednesday, but today it's mostly about how can we use these formal methods that we have seen in a practical application such as game playing, so in our intelligent system. And the general idea of a logic is that we we find generic methods to help us deal with uncertainty in a way of things that haven't been specified explicitly. And that this implicit information that is given in some way can be derived in an ambiguous way. And that means, for example, that we can model some knowledge about the environment and the task explicitly, and that the states that we model somehow are extended with this knowledge automatically, and by that we can make more informed, more knowledge-informed decisions. And that's what this first lecture is about. So these logic-based agents, they need somehow to have a representation of the states they are operating in, including the environments and the tasks that they have and the action that they can take. They have to incorporate some percepts that they get through their sensors, and then update the representation they have in order to be able to deal with this new information and deduce some hidden properties. Of course, they are not hidden. They are sort of implicitly modeled, but not explicitly available in your data. And that makes it possible for the agents to deduce the appropriate action. So the example that Russell and Norvig came up with in the book, which is also described in the reader, is a very simple game. And it's a sort of exploration game of some agent starting in this grid in the position 1 by 1. And the task is to go to the gold that is in this field. Obviously, the game would be to reshuffle and then the agent having to find the way from 1.1 by moving to the right, to the left, down and up, and finding a way to the gold without falling into a pit and without being eaten by the wampus. So it's the wampus world example of an exploration kind of search, an exploration game for this agent starting in 1.1. And there is some information about the environment. We know the task, which, as I described it, you want to go to the gold, so you get some performance standard. If you die, you get minus 1,000. Think about it. And if you win, you get plus 1,000. And then you have to pay some costs per step and so forth. So you can describe the environment as complex as you want. And there are some properties that are important to understand the game. So squares adjacent to the wampus are smelly. So the wampus is a smelly beast. If we go back, you see this is the wampus, and then here it's smelly, here it's smelly, and here it's smelly. Yeah, very simple. The squares adjacent to a pit are breezy. Same, if I go back, you see that there are breezes all around, not in the one diagonal one, but only in the one top down, bottom, left and right. Yeah. And then you have some more sensoric information, but we won't really use that in the remainder of this lecture. So the gold glitters, you can shoot an arrow, whatever. So you can imagine that this could already be implemented as some kind of video game where you are dumped into a room, and this is the information that you get whenever you move forward. Yeah, don't have that much information. You don't know anything when you enter the game. You end up in this room 1-1, and you have to explore the world. Still, there is some things you can use, and that is the information that I gave you, that the square adjacent to the wampus are smelly, and the squares adjacent to a pit are breezy. And again, we can think of this in terms of a game, of a search tree, trying to find the best solution. So before we do this is our world that we operate in. Let's characterize it and then try to understand this in terms of state space problem with some movement between states, some transformation between states, and so forth. So let's go back to the environment. Let's try to understand it. So we have this wampus. He is dumped. The player is dumped in position 1.1, and the question is now how to get to the gold. So the problem is that I do not know yet what happens in the next room. So the fact that it is smelly in the next room or breezy is something that I don't know when the game starts. So we basically start in in a game where we don't have full observability, we only have local perceptions. It's deterministic because we know at each decision that is taken what is going to happen. So if I move into a square where there's a pit, I know that I die. It's static, nothing moves, so the position remains the same. And you can see that if you really would implement an intelligent real video game, these properties would already not hold. So the static nature of the game is a simplification that makes it possible for us to look at this reasoning problem, but is not in a realistic computer game, of course, not the right thing. And then it's in this case, it's a simulation because the Wumpus it belongs more to the game engine rather than taking decision on its own, so it just stays there statically. So that's our description of our problem and environment. And what you basically want to do is some kind of online exploration search. So you are in a state, you have some choices, but there isn't that much known to the possibilities that you have in your game. And this is incorrect what I say, because basically in the first step, when you start here in position 1.1, there isn't that much that you can choose. You can choose to go to position 2.1, and you can choose to go to position 1.2. So now before we make this movement, we would like to know whether those two states are safe. Is it safe to go to 2.1 and 1.2? So that's, if you play this game, you want to know that you don't fall into a trap immediately. So is it safe to go to any of those places? I hear a yes. Can I have some explanation of why this yes comes here?
There's no breeze or stench in position 1.1.
Okay. So basically, no breeze in 1.1 and no stench in 1.1. Huh?
No pit.
No, implies not to pit in 1.2. Yeah? So that was the reasoning that we just applied in order to establish that you can go here. And it's also obviously the same holds for. And then if I know that there is no pit, I also have to check, is there a, what was the other one? There a Wumpus. Is there a Wumpus? So this implies not only that there is no pit, but it also implies that there is no Wumpus. Yeah, and this also implies that there is no Wumpus. Because no breeze implies that there is no pit, and no smell implies that there is no Wumpus. Yeah? That's our very simple human reasoning that we apply when we are in this situation. So basically, we are fine to go in any of the states to 1 or 1.2. Let's suppose we go to this state. Now this is the exploratory phase. So we now really make a physical movement here. So the question at this point was still, is it safe to move? That was a sort of a calculation, a thinking effort. But now we've moved actually to 2.1. So that's now this situation. And in this situation, we get, actually for the first time, we get some sensoric information, namely that there is a breeze in 2.1. That's this information here. And that's it. That's all we get. So now the question is, we have 3 options to go, namely 1.1, 2.2, and 3.1. And the question is again, are they safe? So which one of them is safe?
1.1.
1.1 is safe. Any of the others?
You don't know.
We don't know, exactly. So we cannot derive that 2.2 is safe, because there has been a breeze in here, and this breeze basically means that here is a pit, or here is a pit. So moving up is a risk, and moving right is a risk as well. Yeah?
Is there a reason why we're not modeling shooting and grabbing as options yet? Because wouldn't they, like, is this just a model, discrete, just a model to do?
We're just looking at a very simplified part of the game. That we will not get in this lecture to the situation where there could be a wumpus somewhere. But you might, if you believe that there could be a wumpus somewhere, you could make your play safe by shooting the, and then the wumpus, you would be sure that there would be no wumpus anymore. And then you could follow it.
Is there any interplay between freeze and stink, and freeze blowing away stink, or are they mutually independent?
They're independent, as far as, yeah. So for the purpose of this game, you have a pit, and there's a breeze, you have a wumpus, and it stinks. That is the only thing. It really is a very, very simple part of the game. The other elements were just to make it more interesting, and that you can imagine that you can really build a system here that has some more interesting elements, because you could end up in this situation. You have more than just the option of walking left and right and falling into a pit. Yeah? Okay, so basically, these two are not safe. And then it's a decision for your agent to say, okay, I take the risk, a 50-50 risk, to go left or to go right or to go up. But you have a better option, yeah? You have a question?
2.2 should be safe, otherwise you have found a freeze.
Yeah, but I haven't been there. I don't know yet.
Yeah, but if there was a still there, you would have found a freeze in 1.2 and you really weren't.
But I don't know what is in 1.2. I haven't been there. It's exploratory search. I do not know what is in 1.2. And if you give me a bit more time, then I will show you that 2.2 is indeed safe, as you already reasoned. And you can do that by following this search tree. Okay, now we've realized that this one is sort of safe, and it brings us back to the same state. And now we could decide just to sort of do our determination looping, but that doesn't really make sense a lot, of course. So let's try this one, and we have established that it is safe-wise. So let's go there, let's see what's happening there. And as you rightly pointed out, there is nothing. Yeah? So there's no breathe and no smell. Yeah? And what does it imply? No breathe in 1.2 and no smell in 1.2 implies four things. No whoops and no pit, but where? We knew already that there was no whoops and no pit in this one. But we learned more details. In 2.2, yeah. So there is no whoopers in 2.2. There is no whoopers in 1.3. More? What else do we know? There is no breeze. We have already established. This is something we observe, and we can derive of that. No, we can't derive that. I would be surprised if we could say there is no breeze in 2.2, because the breezes are the things that we observe, and it's difficult to derive. What we can derive is that there's no pit in 2.2, and that there is no wumpus in 2.2. Yeah? I think we can establish that. Because if there was a pit in 2.2, then from 2.2 we would have a breeze here, if there was a pit. Yeah? And if there was a wumpus, it would stink. Yeah? Can we zoom that? Yeah.
Didn't you mean to write not B12 and not S12 instead of not P12? Because we already knew that.
Absolutely right. Sorry. Yeah. So these are our observations. So this is the observation in 1.2. This is the observation in 1.1. Sorry. Thanks for spotting. And that makes it obviously more interesting to derive those pit information. You will also write, I can do that document, one of these recording. Yeah.
Sorry, I was wondering if we need still to include again cell 1 as we did before.
You would, but this is sort of information that you have already from previous rounds. On your knowledge base, you would just add all the knowledge that you have. Okay. So basically, we have the options to go here is 1, 3, 2, 2, and 1, 1. Okay, we know all the nice properties of this one, so let's not worry about it. But now the question is this safe? And if we define safe to be no pit and no wumpus, then we're safe to go there. Yes, the point?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out about the 1 plus 22, and you wrote that twice, like the first place and last place of that instrument, or like have 1 plus 22, and then like yeah. Oh yeah.
That's, I think.
Yeah, I thought that was the same.
No, you're absolutely right. So I just sort of was too quick, and so from basically not having a breeze, you can derive this, and from not having a stink, you can derive these two. And I sort of intertwined those. Yeah? So the point is here that obviously not how this game is played, but that basically by simply doing some logical reasoning, and on purpose I used already these symbols that you know, as you've all had should have had a course in logic before, logic and sets. This is basically a suitable tool to help us do reasoning with the over these kind of situations. And it now helped us to say in 2-2 we can derive from the information that we have, and that was the argument that I think you made in the back, or no, sorry, you in the middle made, that now we can derive that there is no breeze, there is also no pit and no wumpus in 2-2. And now once we've been here in 1-2, we can derive that this is a safe place to go. And basically we can maneuver from this place to this place because we know it's safe, it's okay to go there. And then we can do the next step up, because now we feel the glitter, and you can, by reasoning, go the way up to the gold without being in danger at all in the game. Yeah?
My thing is this: why only breathe and not smell?
Oh yeah, you can probably also. So these are the observations that you. But no. The point I wanted to make here is that we can, in principle, derive that we can go to 2.2 without having to smell or. So the things we can derive from this information is that there is no wumpus and no. And that therefore there is also no pit and no wumpus. And therefore we can derive that it's safe to go there. Yeah, it's this information that is sufficient for us to derive that it's safe to go there. Yeah? Yeah?
So 1-2, there is actually stage, right? Because the wumpus is right above.
The wumpus is a 1-3, so you got to hang on to this part.
Yes. You are right. So we don't have this information. Yep. So we only have this information. And then
how can we assure as 2-2 is safe?
Yeah, because there is no breeze. We know for sure that there is no pit, but we can't derive this.
We are not actually sure that 2-2 is actually safe, but
We are because we have been in this situation, and we haven't derived that it's safe, but we have derived that there is no Wumpas in 2.2.
There is no stage in 2.1.
Exactly.
2.2.
Yeah. Okay. Did everybody get this last piece? Because I was jumping ahead and made a mistake. So the mistake I made was that when you go to 1.2, there is actually a stinge because the Wumpas is above. So you cannot derive from 1.2 without additional information that the Wumpas is not here. So this information about the Wumpas not being in 2.2 actually comes from the exploration of the state here, 2.1, where there was no stinge. So I could conclude in this situation that there is no Wumpas here, and combine it with information that there is no pit there that I got from the other exploration side. And I actually made the mistake of putting these two together. Yeah? Yes?
At the same time, you're also confirming that the Wumpas is 1.3 because there was no stinge. So you've already...
Exactly. So there is one more reasoning that you can do. So the whole point of this exercise is actually not so much getting you safely from 1.1 to the gold, but to make you understand how powerful this reasoning is if we apply it to these kind of situations. And actually I could have taken, maybe that would have made as much sense if you look at a Sudoku game, then I guess you all know how Sudoku works. You start out with an empty 9x9 grid or with some givens, and you try to find constraints so that you can derive at which particular point a certain number holds. And here again, you apply exactly the same kind of thinking of finding constraints for the different cells in order to allow you to make a decision and put a number in a place. And here it's the same. So we just want to understand that there are some rules of the game that play a role and some givens of positions where you are that allow you to make an informed choice of where to go in your game state. And that's all I wanted to say about this. And if you look at the slides later, you will see that all the logical reasoning that I've tried here on the board is given in the correct form underneath here. Yeah? So there's a stench in the cell, which means there's the Wumpas in 1.3 or 2.2, and this sort of logical reasoning is described in human terms down here. And obviously what I want to show you later is that we can represent this kind of knowledge in a language of choice, propositional logic or first order logic, and allow our intelligent agents to make use of this kind of reasoning in the process of deciding what kind of game to play. And related to this, of course, or more interesting for us, is how does it work in Schnapsen? Is it also interesting to do this? And as I tried to explain last time, with Schnapsen we have a different problem, because now in the exploration game of the Wumpas world, the Wumpas could go left or right, that was all. But now in Schnapsen, we have these situations where we have 5 cards in my hand, 5 cards in the opponent's hand, 1 card is known, which is the trump card, and 9 more cards in the pile. So it basically means there are 14 cards that are unaccounted for. So there's an uncertainty about 14 cards. So I will show you an alternative for it, but this is now the situation we have. So that's the graphical game engine that you've seen. That's my opponent's cards. She has already played the queen of diamond, and that's my cards. And this is the pile. So basically what I have is I have 14 cards that I'm unaccounted for. I have 14 over 5. Is it 14 over 5 or is it 5 over 14? So it's, I think it's 14 over 5 possible ways of ordering those cards, of assigning 14 cards in 5 places. And that is 14 faculty divided by 5 faculty times 9 faculty. Yeah?
I think 14 minus 5 factor, right?
Yeah, that's 14 minus 9 is 5. Yeah? That's how you come to the 9. No, it's, you have to watch me. These kind of things where I tend to make mistakes. But this one I think is correct. So this gives us different ways of ordering, sort of assigning the 14 cards that are unknown to the 5 slots of my opponent. But then I still have 9 cards that I can shuffle in the different orders. So I have 9 faculty more ways of assigning the cards in the pile. So basically this gives us 14 faculty divided by 5 faculty choices at every level of the game. It decreases, of course, because in the second round we only have 7 faculty. We have fewer cards, fewer unknowns. But in the first layer of the game, I have this amount of possible choices. So the way I explained it last week, what you have to do, or what is the most successful method up to now, is Monte Carlo, perfect information Monte Carlo sampling, as it's called. And that is basically that in this search tree that we have, in the first level, which is enormously wide, you just make a random sample. You do as if you know the game, you make a random rollout, and you average over the game results. So that's one approach, which is sort of averaging over possible games that you play with possible opponents' hands. And that's surprisingly successful. Still, if we play as humans, I think we still play very different to this approach. And so how do we do that? So basically, we are in a situation, I know that my opponent has 5 possible cards or whatever, or I can play now 5 cards, and which one is the best option? And in a way, this is exactly the same as we did before. We have some explorative search, so I know some information, my opponent played a card, and now I have my cards, I have this card, his card, or her card, and I can make a decision. So I need to model the notion of what is the best option. And I can do that with some kind of logic. And in order to do that, I've started our game engine. And this is now a game. And we are in phase 1, the first move. And my opponent has played this card, the Jack of Diamond. I'm learning. So which card would you, as now experienced Schnapsen players, play as your next move? Yes?
I would go for the King of Diamond.
You would go for the King of Diamond. Any other options? Yes?
The Ace of Diamond.
The Ace of Diamond. Okay, why would you use the King of Diamond?
Because I don't know where is the King of Diamond, so I would keep the Ace to go there.
Okay, so your strategy would be, you don't know where the 10 is, and you might gain the 10 in one of the next moves. So you would keep the Ace in order to be able to win the 10. Yeah?
And to add on that, because I think that the jump you got is the Ace of Clubs.
Yes?
So after playing that, it's my turn. It's just
No, you can't yet, because you, maybe if you get the,
Next turn, you can switch with the Jack.
When he leads, yeah. When your player leads.
so but you cannot, oh sorry, I didn't see the Jack. Yeah, of course. Okay, very good. Yeah, I have one more comment?
I think a better move might throw out the Jack of Stars in this case. Because this way we give the minimum amount of points, and then we still don't throw out our support count.
Okay, so let me write that down. So you said the Ace of Diamond. You said the King of Clubs. And you said the Jack of Hearts.
I think it was King of Diamonds. I think you said King of Diamonds rather than Clubs. Because Clubs is...
Yeah, sure, sorry, yeah. Diamond, King of Diamond. And you said
Jack of Hearts.
Jack of Hearts. And we've heard 3 interesting strategies. And I thought he was completely off when he started with his argument, but I was convinced now that this is really a good strategy. Can we somehow summarize the strategies in a way? Can you try summarizing? your choice. Why you said I would take the ace of the same color.
To maximize your points, like the short ones.
Something like this?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yes?
Just like to add that he also saves the king in case he gets defeated by him. So he's like here already.
Okay. Yeah, that would also be part of this strategy.
And also it lets you lead, and then it allows you to get the highest card in the game, because you get the ace of trumps. Which is undeniably a really good move.
Yeah. Not doing well here. Gain highest card. Okay, the gain the highest card also applies to your approach. So this one is also here. Here you would have something like don't lose ace or keep powerful card.
Because there might be a dead opponent.
Yeah.
Might lose a winning.
Hmm?
Might lose a better winning. So going out the
Yeah. So it would violate a strategy, let's say, keep waiting. Yeah? Okay. We could go on and sort of talk also about the strategy of the Jack of Hearts, because I also think there is some argument for. There is also arguments against, I think, because two of those things is that you keep the initiative in these two strategies. Here you lose the initiative. Sort of lose the initiative. Yeah. And then you obviously would have here not lose. So I hope it was a bit clear what I've tried to show you. And that is that there is an enormous amount of human strategy that even we as sort of not professional Schnapsen player can put into these games and make decisions on the basis of now what do we think is the best strategy. So that's one thing. The other thing is actually it's not absolutely clear who is going to win and which one is the best move. So it's a personal choice. You could say I prefer playing to this strategy, or you could say no, I'd rather wait and see and I keep my cards and I react later. I still have the opportunity to do it. My opponent will never be able to get this card because I have the jack, so I have time, I can wait. So these are intrinsically sort of human strategies that might differ and that might impact on which thing to decide on. And in this week, we're trying to see how we can technically make this part of our decision procedures for a gameplay and an intelligent gameplay and knowledge-based Schnapsen agent. And what I think is already very, very interesting to see as a study of a research question, if I compare these different, I mean, it's a very simple example, and already we have many, many different strategies. And if we compare those strategies in our intelligent agents, I'd really be curious to see which one is better if you play it over hundreds of thousands of games in real and really evaluate the strategies. What is the better strategy if you play it in your games? And that's what we're going to try to do this week, to allow you to model these kind of techniques in a logical language and run it in your own systems so that you can compare those. Maybe you can compare it with the perfect information random sampling, so the Monte Carlo bot, and a knowledge one where you really put the effort of really making it a human, your own strategy, what you think is the best strategy for playing Schnapsen. That's basically what the research project at the end in the last week is all about. So you can try it out. I don't think you can give it as input. So what happens if I have this one? Yeah. So now you do the knowledge exchange, Trump exchange, and you can all play it out according to your wishes. And then you would do at every step, you get new information, and you would have this application of strategies again and again and again. And you might even change your strategy. You could say in the first 2 moves, I want to play for getting the jag or getting a marriage. But this keep a wedding strategy, first of all, you have to evaluate it because the queen might have gone to your opponent. So in principle, you have to restart this exploration and this reasoning process at each level of the game until you come to phase 2, where everything changes. Because in phase 2, we have perfect information and we can just brutally play out an alphabetical pruned main max argument. So I think you can already see now how your intelligent agent in week 4 will look like and what kind of intrinsic properties you can test and evaluate and work on in the practical assignment. So what is coming now in the next is that if we sort of summarize our multi-agents, our intelligent agents based on logic, in both of the cases, in a way, this is online exploration search. So we really make explicit the properties of the game, the properties of the states, and reason over them. So we can reason over where's the wumpers in 3.3, where's the breeze, and then we can say, we can define a notion of a safe state, for example, one state where there's no wumpers and no pit, and then we have our rules with which to reason with to make sure that we know if there is something is a safe space, a safe state. Yeah?
Online search, does that just mean you're doing the search while the game is already running?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And in our card game, we have the same. We do it round by round. We gather new information, and then we have to apply our strategy again. And in this case, we do not define a notion of safe, or but we define a notion of better or preferred, where we have a personal definition of our strategy. And then basically the logical reasoning that you have already seen in courses previously, they are now really turned into practice, into something that you can use to determine which is the most the most suitable successor state to explore next. Or in other words, where to go in the Wumpers world or which card to play in Schnapsen. And all you need for that is logic, logic, logic. And I'm going to talk about that in the second half.